Have you ever asked yourself why it is that every screen comes out blue? They don't have red. You actually have to put software in to change it. There's a reason, my friend. Do you understand the game that's going on? They're dumbing you down. Why is it that every tech company has blue lit screens? I'm going to tell you the reason why. It's because that's how DARPA wants it. That way you can be programmed further. So, wow. Oh no, it's even more wow than that. You haven't even got to the wow stage.
This is Dr. Jack Cruz, a neurosurgeon. In a recent podcast with Danny Jones, he made some controversial statements. Pay attention because the connections he makes are truly mind-blowing.
I pay attention to all of the families of the big Silicon Valley people. Why? Because they are all tied to MK Ultra 4.0, 5.0. Every single one of them. And there's a reason they follow the rules of the industrial military complex, because they're designed to do that. And guess what? They get that training at the universities that they went. Stanford, Harvard.
There is a hidden connection between Silicon Valley, the CIA's MK Ultra project, and Las Vegas, something you'd never expect. Watch this.
They get together and Mo says, I got an idea. Let's go build a casino in the desert. Everybody thinks he's crazy at first, okay? So they build Vegas. The first thing he did is he put one-armed bandits in all the casinos. He blue lit everything. Why? Because he paid attention to how people spent money. He realized when you used artificial light, it seemed like people spent more money. So then what's the second thing he does in like 1952, 53? He starts painting all the windows in the casino black.
So you can't see outside.
Can't see outside, and he doesn't want to go outside.
The CIA decided they needed to find out more about mind control. They were curious if there was any real science behind these claims. At this point, MK Ultra was born. MK Ultra was a secret project, and it came from merging two main ideas. First, there was a group in Dallas interested in studying mind control. The second part came from a Nazi surgeon named Kurt Plotkin, who worked in 1937. Kurt believed it was possible to control people's minds using Mexican peyote, a cactus that causes hallucinations. He started experimenting with this, and the CIA took an interest. The CIA also began studying other methods, such as the effects of lights and wireless signals, to see if they could control or influence people. Eventually, they hired a man named Sidney Gottlieb to run the MK Ultra program. Gottlieb led the project from 1950 to 1953 and perhaps even longer, until 1964.
So all this information from the CIA and FBI are transferred into DARPA. DARPA then takes it the next level. They go and they hire a guy in New Orleans. I told you we'd eventually come back to New Orleans. A guy named Alton Ostner. He's first an FBI asset as a surgeon, but then he becomes a CIA asset because of this issue here. They go and hire a PhD researcher named Delgado.
Dr. Jose Delgado was a Spanish neuroscientist who developed the Stemosiever, a device to stimulate and control brain activity wirelessly. He famously stopped the charging bull using this technology, highlighting the potential to influence behavior.
And they start putting wires into the bull's head to find out, can they stop and control the bull using electric signals? Why? Because they already have started to learn about Becker's work. So now this is the idea. Now they're trying to execute. They're trying to use this as a weapon.
They were able to control the bull's behavior using wires connected to the brain. Specifically, they could stop the bull from attacking the matador at the crucial moment. Seeing the success of this wireless method, they wanted to see if it was possible to do the same thing without any physical wires, essentially using wireless technology to control the bull remotely.
They had all the patents and everything they stole from Tesla. They also had all Marconi's work. At this same time, remember, Motorola is now one of the guys that's the industrial military company. They know that wireless telephony is actually coming. So they decide to employ it here first.
Delgado discovered it was indeed possible to control the animal's behavior without using wires. He realized that they didn't need to perform brain surgery to implant any devices in the animal's brain. Instead, they found a way to control the animal without any direct physical connection or invasive procedures. This was a significant breakthrough because it showed that brain activity could be influenced remotely without needing to implant anything inside the brain.
But this was the key step. This is the step where I think your audience, people find it incredulous when I tell them the next step was, could you do this using light and light alone? And it turns out they found out you could. If you use blue light specifically, it actually destroys the dopamine reward tracks in your brain. Just so you know, Meta and Google today own those patents.
They found the way to deliver blue light through screens, perfecting the method of getting blue light into people's eyes using this technology. In the 1950s and 60s, IBM was the big tech company working on this kind of technology. They were developing liquid crystal displays, LCDs, even back then, though these screens didn't become common for the public until the 1990s. Later on, during the Obama administration, the shift from analog to digital TV further promoted the use of LCD screens, which are known to deliver blue light. Obama also pushed to ban incandescent bulbs, leading to the use of new lighting that could also emit blue light.
Incandescent bulbs not only have fake blue light, but they also have purple and red, which is what you need as the antidote to blue. You probably remember when you were a little kid, you touched the incandescent bulb, it's hot as
Yeah.
Well, the proxy that they're using to you is, they burn too much energy because they have UV light and red light in it, and that makes heat. So therefore, we should get rid of that, do blue. But you have no idea that DARPA already want blue light everywhere so they can control you with it. That's the real answer behind this whole program.
According to Dr. Jack Kruse, infrared light is very important for the brain, while blue light has a negative impact. He explains that red and infrared light can be beneficial, especially in brain surgery. There are panels you can buy that emit infrared light, but for surgery, more specific types are needed. Infrared A, ranging from 600 to 1000 nanometers, is essential, but near infrared light is even more crucial because it penetrates deeper into the brain. He also found that a photo switch in the brain can be activated using 1280 nanometer light, particularly when paired with 380 nanometer light. This combination helps trigger beneficial responses in the brain, aiding the surgery.
That photo switch is actually important with 380 nanometer light. That's actually the big control switch between anabolic and catabolic metabolism. And what does that effectively mean? When you use those specific frequencies of light, you can optimize metabolism while the patient's asleep. So if any of my anesthesiologist listens to this and they want to know why I was doing what I did, I never told anybody what I was doing because I was always afraid I'd wind up in front of the medical board. But I was guaranteeing that people would wake up from anesthesia like this, because I knew that was one of the big risks, that we need to have people recover fast. And it turns out if you understand the two photo switches for metabolism, which is 380 nanometer light, that controls the mTOR switch. 1280 light controls the free radical switch.
Dr. Kruse says that the body manages energy at the cellular level, specifically focusing on the balance between using ATP, the main energy molecule, and dealing with free radicals. Most people don't understand this balance because they aren't familiar with mitochondrial medicine. Nitric oxide, he explains, is a free radical, which means it has an unpaired electron. When nitric oxide gets into the mitochondria, the cell's powerhouses, it actually stops ATP production. Many doctors think that ATP is always needed for energy, but Kruse says that's not entirely true. When we're exposed to sunlight, our bodies reduce ATP production. Instead, we start to rely on the sun's energy more directly. This happens because sunlight helps to energize the water in our blood plasma, which is 93% water. He explains that one of his foundational principles is about how light, water, and magnetism all interact in the body. When cells are able to store more light energy in their water networks, patients tend to feel better and have improved health. Essentially, Kruse is saying that sunlight combined with water in our cells plays a major role in keeping us healthy beyond just the usual ATP energy system.
How did I learn all that? I learned it from the story of photosynthesis. Why? Because of chlorophyll and hemoglobin. They look exactly the same. And you said that you listened to the Huberman podcast, and I know there was a lot of science in there, but you might remember that I told you the two most important biologic semiconductors before the KT event were hemoglobin and chlorophyll. Why?
Right.
Because they have a nitride cage around it. Well, remember, what's the most dominant gas in the atmosphere? Turns out it's nitrogen.
Dr. Cruz is explaining how energy worked in living things before there was oxygen. Back then, two important proteins acted like semiconductors, which means they could help generate electrons needed for energy. He thought about how things changed after the KT event, a big disaster that wiped out many life forms, and realized there was more to the story. He understood that these semiconductor proteins were giving off light to water in the body, as Dr. Robert Beckett had found. This made the water behave like a kind of quantum battery, which means the water could store and use energy in a special, efficient way. Many nutrition studies, including those that doctors and researchers rely on, do not account for these effects of light. These studies assume they are showing how nutrition truly works in the body, but they overlook the impact of light entirely. Since light is an important factor for health, ignoring it means these studies are missing a crucial part of the picture when it comes to understanding how nutrition really affects us.
Our mitochondria makes a special kind of water. It's called deuterium depleted water. You don't get any deuterium depleted water coming out of your tap at home. So what happens if you ran all the experiments with that type of water? And it turns out that water has a high dielectric constant. And what does that mean in English? It means it makes more electrons. What's the story of life? The more electrons you have, the better you do. What do electrons do? More electrons you have, the more light you could absorb.
When enough light enters the system, the brain can function better. When asked why he uses methylene blue, Dr. Cruz explains that it's because methylene blue helps provide more electrons. More electrons combined with shining light on the brain leads to improved brain function, which ultimately makes him a better surgeon. Dr. Cruz also mentions the bright blue lights used during surgery, like the xenon light. He suggests that surgeons use a spectroscope to analyze the lights used in the operating room, like those on microscopes, headgear, or overhead lights. By doing this, they can see the light spectrum and understand how it might affect patient outcomes, as he believes the type of light used during surgery has a significant effect on recovery.
I remember I specifically changed where I did surgery into a hospital that didn't have the best equipment in the world. But you know what they had? They had a courtyard that I could bring my patients outside in the sun. And the anesthesiologist didn't with me, and fight with me about doing this. And they were stunned. They were like, I can't believe this guy's patients just wake up and they do great when they shouldn't. Like the other doctors who operated on people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, they would be in the ICU for 2 or 3 days because they had sundowning and everything else. And I would do my subdurals and bring the patient outside, and they're like, this fucking guy's going home the next day. That is how powerful sunlight is for our biology.
Did you know that our bodies create light internally? Creating light inside the body is crucial for survival, especially in environments with less sunlight, like places far north, high latitudes. A biophysicist named Fritz Popp conducted important research in the 1960s and 70s. Around the same time, another researcher, Dr. Robert Becker, discovered that bones have properties similar to semiconductors, especially materials that can manage electrical flow. He showed that bones are made of collagen and apatite, which act like P-type and N-type semiconductors. These two components manage electrical currents and suggested that a photoelectric effect, a process where light causes electrical changes, was happening in bones. Since Becker wasn't a physicist, he brought in a specialist, possibly named Charlie Bowman, to help figure it out. This work demonstrated that light and electricity were involved even in bones, indicating that our bodies can generate light as part of how they function.
When we check for the photoelectric effect both ways, with collagen and with apatite, it glows brown-red. And when you do it the other way, it glows blue. Then that means that we should have a light signature. Like, for example, anytime a doctor is listening to your podcast, they're going to say, well, when I cut somebody open, I don't see any light. Well, you're not. You won't see it because it's ultra weak biophotons.
Fritz Popp used special equipment to prove that living things, including humans, create light. To see this light, which is very faint, you need special equipment called a photomultiplier. In the 1960s, Fritz Popp created photomultipliers, machines that could detect this tiny light. He then tested all kinds of living things, including leaves and other organisms, by placing them in the photomultiplier to see if they emitted light.
I spent almost $100,000 translating Russian journals about scientists that were doing this work both in Japan and Russia and found out that mitochondrial DNA actually creates light through the process of breaking electrons and protons down from food. And I kept reading it, and the number one thing that I remember from the papers, still to this day, that you had to have oxygen and you had to have electron chain transport working for this to happen.
Melanin, the pigment in our skin, is produced by a gene called POMC, which is activated by UV light. Fritz Popp discovered that every living cell emits very weak UV light called biophotons. This suggests that UV light is naturally produced by our bodies and is likely used for internal signaling. This challenges the idea that UV light is purely toxic. Instead, it might be crucial for important biological processes that we don't fully understand just yet.
Dermatologists and ophthalmologists are assholes because biology is making UV light. That means it's not toxic. That means it's being used for optical photonic signaling that we don't know about. We're creating light and we absorb light, and we have all these proteins in us that are chromophore proteins. I said, God or evolution wouldn't have done this if it wasn't important. You know, I started finding UVA detectors on our cornea and our skin. I never learned that in medical school. When I saw that, I'm like, there's a story here that hasn't been told.
Dr. Cruz criticizes the medical implant industry, which promotes using screws, rods, and other metal parts to fix broken bones. The argument is that implants interfere with the natural healing process of bones because they mess up the bone's photoelectric ability, the way bones naturally use electrical currents and light to heal. According to this, metal implants destroy the natural process. Bones are special because, unlike most body tissues, they regenerate completely without scarring. For example, if you break your arm and it heals, there's no mark inside showing where it was broken. It's as if it never happened, which is different from most other body parts. The liver is one other organ that can regrow, but this kind of complete regeneration is rare in mammals. Dr. Robert Becker did research in the 1960s to understand how bones heal. He found that our body creates a small direct current, DC, that stimulates red blood cells in the bone marrow to de-differentiate, meaning they turn into bone cells, which is how fractures heal completely without a scar. Becker also discovered that the main parts of bone, collagen and apatite, are semiconductors, meaning they can conduct electrical currents. He even found that bones can emit light, much like an LED, showing that bones use both electricity and light for healing. Another interesting thing is the testosterone problem in young men. Many people today, especially young men in their 20s and 30s, are focused on boosting testosterone levels, often through injections, seeing it as a fountain of youth for energy and vitality. This trend is growing rapidly, but there's an underlying issue behind it that isn't being addressed. Here's what Dr. Jack Cruz has to say about it.
They all have pregnantal and Steele syndrome from their screens. This is the basis of MK Ultra's work. It's what happens. Oh yes, my friend. It destroys your sex steroid hormones by design. And you know how we can make a prediction that somebody's...
What destroys your sex?
The blue light.
The blue light, right, yeah.
Blue light screens, non-native EMF, RF, microwaves, take it all away.
But what do you make about the sort of obsession right now with young people and this testosterone therapy?
You're not listening to me. They're obsessed with tech, therefore that's why they're obsessed with that.
Okay, I see.
Fix the tech addiction, then you fix that problem.
That's it for today's video. Be sure to check out Danny Jones's channel. His podcasts are truly fascinating, and if you enjoyed this, subscribe and give us a like.